Welcome to the Purpose Driven Mom Show, episode 399. Today, we're talking all about why self-care, gratitude, and paying attention to your mental health matters. I'm going to be telling you a little bit about my own story, journey, struggle, whatever adjective you want to fill in when it comes to mental health, and then talk about some strategies that I've used to help myself bounce back when I needed it. You can go to a purposedrivenmom.com/podcast 399 if you want to check out any of the show notes from today's episode. Now, I'm going to tell you a cliff notes of my story. We have other episodes where I've gone in depth, but I've struggled in the area of mental health since I was about 12 years old. So I guess a trigger warning before I get started on any of this episode today is that, I am going to be talking about some sensitive things that might hit you in some sort of place. So feel free at any point, turn the YouTube channel off, turn the podcast off, come back to another episode. This might not be the one for you. But I do want to share a little bit of my story because I think that that's really important. We see a lot of people on the quote outside and we think they have it all together and it looks fine. I had somebody very close to me say to me once, well, I don't call and check in on you because you just don't look like you need my help. And I think a lot of times those people who look like they don't need our help the most are the ones that need that check-in, right? We're the strong ones. And I saw a quote said something like, I don't want to have to be the strong one who holds it together. Like sometimes I just want to be able to fall apart. And I feel like part of my story is I've never been allowed to fall apart. When I was in middle school, I feel like I started to struggle with some sad thoughts, depressive thoughts, and it was right around the time where my parents were getting divorced, so I'm sure a lot of that had to do with it. And I also started to binge eat to kind of deal with my feelings. During that time in middle school, I was seeing like the guidance counselor because I started to have some negative and suicidal ideation type thoughts. Now, as an adult, I can look back and I know that, I don't think that I was going to hurt myself. This was for me a way to feel like I mattered, feel like someone would pay attention to me. If I was struggling and I was having a quote depressive episode, or I was sad, or I was like threatening to hurt myself, my parents paid attention to me, and for me, that was all that I wanted. These kind of thoughts continued all through high school, where I started to drink to medicate myself so that I can kind of forget about whatever issues I was struggling with. And that was a really negative spiral for me. It spiked my anxiety, spiked my depression. And honestly, it gave me days where I just didn't feel like going on anymore. I thought, well, what's the point, right? What is the point of continuing? My mental health got a little bit better when I went into college. And then towards the end of college, my senior year, it started to get worse and decline again. And so the anxiety was always something that was in the back of my mind. The anxiety is always there. And for me, I explained to someone like my anxiety is very much like racing thoughts. And we call it like the shame spiral for me, where I start to think something and then it kind of catastrophizes. So if you've ever like made a mistake, some people can just like bounce back. My anxiety holds on to that mistake, overanalyzes it in a way that I think that everyone hates me and I'm a terrible person, and then I kind of cannot get myself back together. And so I struggled more in college, in and out of therapy, was fine for a little bit. Interestingly, the only time I actually felt quote unquote fine when it came to my mental health was when I was pregnant. And when I talked to a naturopathic doctor years later, she explained to me it's because of my hormones, and I wasn't on the birth control pill, which had made my anxiety even worse. They were actually regulating while I was pregnant because of the way my hormone levels are so off. After I had both my kids, I struggled with postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, and postpartum rage, and it was a hard time. There was a lot of crying. There was a lot of thoughts of, like bad things happening. That was like a pervasive one for me, where I would go to take out the trash and then or go down the stairs and I would think, well, what happened if I just like slipped and fell and hit my head right now and like broke all of my bones and died like right here? Like how long before somebody would be able to find the kids? And I would start to ruminate on being like afraid to take the trash out during the day because something could happen to me, and things like that. And it was bad. I went in and out of therapy. We're in an out phase currently. I'm looking for a new therapist, ready to get back in. Therapy is amazing. And I have found some other strategies when I went back and got my life coach certification that, again, they don't replace therapy, but they've helped me with my bounce back. And those are some of the ones I'm going to share today. Okay. I want to say all this that I'm not a therapist, right? Like I have an online certification as a life coach. And I've been able to use a lot of those things to help me with the bounce back. And that's where I want to step in for you today. I want to help you with the repel. I want to help you come back out of it faster. That is one of the things that I've noticed in the things I've studied with the way that the brain works is how can I get back on track with my less negative thoughts, right? It's not always the positive. It's not always this toxic positivity of you've got to be fine, but how can I stop my spiral? That was the question I kind of, honestly, when I got my life coach certification, that was really the question I wanted to answer. How do I stop my spiral? How do I get myself to a place where I can function and not feel really down on myself or negative or start snapping at my kids or anyone who looked wrong in my direction? How can I survive and thrive? And I'm going to talk to you about 3 pieces of that that have really helped. One is self-care, one is gratitude, and the other is tracking and journaling my mental health patterns. These things allow my brain to take a pause. I have found that allowing my brain to stop, giving myself more downtime, that's something I've done more in the past few years, giving myself more downtime allows me to stop my body and my brain long enough. That is the thing that with my anxiety, that shame spiral, it doesn't feel like it'll ever end. It just continues and continues. And when I allow myself to pause, what I'm allowing myself to do is get back physically in my body, right? A lot of times when I struggle with some of the stuff that happens with my anxiety, I feel like my mouth is just moving. I don't know if anyone else ever feels that way. Like I can't stop myself. Like I'll say these things and I'm like, I don't mean what I'm saying, right? I'll get frustrated at something and then start stomping around the house about how terrible my house is and how I'm such a bad mom and I can't do this and that. And I'm just saying these things and my brain is saying, stop. You don't mean these things. Why are you saying them? But I can't stop them. And so these 3 things, the self-care, the gratitude, and the tracking of the feelings and behaviors have really helped me kind of turn it around a little bit. And so I want you to take some of the tips that I'm going to share with you today, piecemeal them. Take the ones that you're like, this could help me a little bit. Sometimes I feel like I struggle with racing thoughts and I'm not sure where to go from there. All right. So let's start with self-care. Self-care is the most proactive of these things. We'll kind of go from proactive to reactive strategies today. Self-care is any gift you give to your own body, your soul, your mind, yourself. I know that, people be like, well, bubble baths aren't self-care. If that is self-care, do you let it be self-care, right? For me, self-care is time to do what I want. This is the thing I have found as a mom. My love language is acts of service. And I explained to my husband, my love language, it used to be words of affirmation. If you've never taken the 5 love languages test, but it used to be words of affirmation. And I realized that it's somewhere along the past 5 years it switched. And now it's become acts of service. Why? I've become more confident in who I am as a person. So I don't need the affirmations externally from other people as much as I used to. Now I still need them. It's my secondary, but it's not as much as it used to. I used to like need to hear, like if he didn't tell me I was a good mom every single day, I would like lose it. And that was like part of the anxiety piece. Well, now acts of service is my love language. And I explained to my husband, it's because time is my most precious commodity as a mom of 3, right? Time is the one thing that is finite. And I value my time so much. So when people waste my time, when I feel like my time isn't being honored, I get really upset. But when people do things to give me time back, like my husband today, we have 1 car right now. And he went and did the Target pickup order and I didn't have to do it. I was like, come here, let me have a hug. Like that for me, any of those things that value my time, right? So for me, self-care is anything time sensitive and time renewing. This could look however you want. If your self-care is a bubble bath, take the bubble bath. Sometimes for me, it's journaling. Sometimes for me, most times for me, self-care is reading. I find that I love to read. I read probably anywhere between 4 and 9 books a month. I enjoy it. I don't love TV as much because I find that TV kind of sucks me in so much that I have trouble stopping myself. Whereas with reading, most times I can like pause myself after at least an hour, right? Whereas Netflix is, he just keeps going, right? Like, keep watching the episode. So I really like to read. That is a self-care for me. On the days I do not read at all, I'm a crabby patty because there's something about reading that allows me to stop. I need a quieter environment. I struggle to read like if my kids are watching TV, like yesterday, for example, my son wasn't feeling good. So I was sitting snuggling with him on the couch, and I kept trying to like read on my Kindle with one hand while I had my other arm around him. And I was really struggling because his show was just too loud. Like I need a quieter space. So what the reading does is it allows me to have quiet. As moms, we don't get that quiet. I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. My son tends to be up before me. I am on the second that there's noise, the second that I'm awake. I don't have a lot of quiet space in my day. And so one of the things that I'm doing is reading, stopping the time, getting in a quiet space, and doing something that I just find enjoyable. And I think when you think about your self-care, I want you to think about things that you can do that don't involve anyone needing you. That's really the biggest piece of self-care for me. It's like, what is something I can do all for me where nobody needs me? So I'm running. I'm going to keep talking about it every episode because I'm training for a half marathon in September. And I'm slow and it takes me a long time to run, but this is a self-care for me. Nobody needs me when I run. It's just me getting to be alone in my space and run as needed and take care of myself. And it feels like I'm giving myself a big hug. Like when I'm done panting and I don't look like a tomato and froze. I'm super red when I run. I feel so proud of myself for just showing up for myself. I say that to myself all the time, like, I'm really proud that you showed up every time I run. I'm really proud you showed up today. Anything that you can do self-care wise for you, I want you to start planning out. Now, this is proactive, right? Because we can plan it out. We can say to ourselves, I know that if I do these things, it's going to refuel me. And I like to pre-plan it because I know I'm going to need the fueling. What often happens is we wait until we need the fueling to plan the fueling, and then it's not there. It's the end of the day and we're tired and we're exhausted, but we have too many things to do, so we can't stop, right? Pre-plan out things that are going to bring you joy and going to fuel you. I mentioned that I like to start crafting. I'm going to learn to crochet. I'm working on my latch hook pillow. Once I finish my pillow, I'm going to start crocheting. It's just for me. It's just fun. I just like to sit, put on some music, and just take like 15-20 minutes for me. And I think more than anything, it's the stopping and the slowing down, but it's the act of showing up for me. And it feels super indulgent. Like I'm just sit here for 20 minutes, like put on some music. Nobody needs me. I'm gonna do this thing I want to do for me. It feels super indulgent, which is sad, but true, right? But it allows me to like take care of myself. So I plan it out every single day. When I look at my plan, I ask myself, what part of the day is for Cara? Right? And you can go through and highlight it and say, this is the stuff that I did for me. Let me look actually. So here I've got my planner. If you're on YouTube, you can see it. This is my plan for today. And I want to see, let me grab a highlighter in real time. Let's just do this. And I'm going to grab this highlighter and I'm going to highlight each of my time blocks and I'm going to see how good I did. I'm going to test myself. So my 6 to 9 block, question, what am I doing just for me? That's my running. Nobody bothers me. I'm on the treadmill. It's beautiful. So during this time block, I've got this space for myself. Okay, my 9 to 12 block. I don't have anything that was just for me planned, but I do know that I stopped when I was done with my work and I ate my lunch and I scrolled through my TikTok for a little bit and I watched like a video on running in-person events because I'm running an in-person event in September. Tickets coming soon. So I don't have it on here, but that's there. So let's look at the rest of the day. Okay, so 12 to 3, I have my work. I don't have anything planned during this time. So I need to catch myself and say, hey, what are you going to do for you? Even if it's just 5 minutes. From 3 to 6, that's where I have reading. So I'm going to highlight that. And then from 6 to 9, I'm going to work on my latch hook. That's in there. So I can see if I look at my day, each time block has a small piece. Again, the running's probably the longest, right? It's about a 40-minute workout. Probably will latch hook for like 15. I'm probably going to read for 30 to 40 minutes. That feels really good. Got 24 hours in a day, and I'm going to spend maybe about 2 hours doing something that I want to do. It's allowed and it's permitted. So how do you plan your self-care? What are you doing? I want you to look at your tomorrow and ask yourself how you're going to plan it. Now, the other piece that really has helped my mental health is gratitude. And this isn't the toxic positivity of gratitude where you're like, I gotta be happy because it's how I have to show up. This is where you stop and you honor and you thank yourself and you think about the things that you have going on in your life, even when it's hard. So you can probably hear it. I'm super congested. I've been sick for weeks. It's been really hard on my mental health, honestly, because I'm scared. I'm fearful that I'm getting sick. Last year, I got super sick. I had started just the same. Back-to-back sinus infections was triggered mono. I had like Epstein-Barr in my, in my blood from when I was a kid. So I got mono for months. I mean, it was really hard. And so I really was struggling to find any piece of gratitude, anything I was grateful for, because I was just miserable. But one of the things that helps me kind of move forward is that pausing and saying, like, what can I be grateful for? Like, I can semi-breathe today. Like, it's not good. It's not good at all. It's not 100%. And my sinuses are in a lot of pain, but it's better than it was. Today I got 2 miles done. I was supposed to do 2.5 and I had to stop because I'm still coming off of this cold. So I got 2 miles done and I stopped and I said, Cara, thank you for moving your body this way. When I started my couch to 5K, it was a 5-minute walk, a 2-minute run, and a 5-minute walk. I was running for 2 minutes. Now, again, I mentioned 13-minute mile. I was on the treadmill today for almost 40 minutes between the walk and the run and the cool down. The progress is what I like to find gratitude in. So on the hard days, one of the things that I like to do is use my planner. So I don't use the calendar layout in my planner. I just use really the week spread. And so the calendar layout itself is pretty empty. So one of the things that I like to do is go in and write gratitude, a sentence of gratitude on the days. This is really easy because then I can see which days I've forgotten, which days I'm on, and it keeps a really nice record. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about different trackers you can use for gratitude, but I think having like a morning gratitude when you wake up, having an end of the day, we talk about the to-do list piece of gratitude where you're, instead of looking at all the things you didn't do, you're like, look at what I did do. Look at what do I accomplish? The question again to ask yourself, tied to the self-care, look how I showed up for me today. What things am I grateful for? Everybody might be sick in my house, but honestly, I'm grateful that I have a flexible job like that. The past 3 weeks, that's what's been getting me through. Like, I could not imagine. I was a high school teacher for almost 10 years. Can imagine having to manage my home and be sick and have a traditional job where I couldn't rest if I needed to. I'm thankful that I've built these things. And I think that's very important as well. So do you have a gratitude practice? Do you have a place where you're writing these things down, where you're thinking? And I think this helps too when your mental health starts to go into that comparison mode, that imposter syndrome. I think about this with my business a lot, where I'm like, well, I didn't make this much money. This month wasn't here. I didn't hit this goal. Well, what can I be grateful for? Like, what piece of my business am I grateful? Look at my progress. I think that's the biggest piece of gratitude is like, look at my progress. Now, we talked a little self-care, how gratitude fits in, and I just want to talk about tracking your mental health and your feelings and why this is important. Again, I'm not a therapist. I have my certification in cognitive behavioral technique, which is similar to cognitive behavioral therapy, but I'm not a therapist. So this is not real therapy, but I will give you a technique that really helps me, and that is the tracking of how I feel. One of the things that tracking how I feel when I'm when I'm feeling upset about something or when I'm feeling happy even, is it allows me to have a pattern interrupt. When my anxiety is really bad and I need to just pause and get my brain like back on track, what happens is by stopping to write it down, you have this part of your brain, the reticular activating system, that's kind of like our fight or flight, right? And it turns off. When you stop to write things down, what you're allowing is your brain to have space to turn back on. You can't be rational when you're in those moods. So I like to track how I'm feeling, why I'm feeling. I'm going to give you an example of a really cool chart you can make. Because it allows me to pause, it allows me to analyze, it allows me to see patterns. I also like to do I have some really cool trackers I'm going to share with you in a little bit, but they're kind of like week over week, month over month, year over year type trackers. Why? Because we will catastrophize. Everything's terrible in my life. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a terrible person. Every day sucks. Like, all those things. But when you can look week over week, be like, actually, this was just a really hard day today. Like, I just had a really hard piece of this day. It wasn't that everything was terrible. It was just this one little piece. It really allows you to anchor back into the truth. All right. So I want to talk to you a little bit about when I was a teacher, I was on special education, and I would do FBAs, functional behavior assessments and analysis for students with special needs. We would talk about ABC charts, antecedent, behavior, and consequence. Now I've taken this chart and I've kind of adapted it to use for my own tracking of feelings. And I want to encourage you to do the same. Okay. So you're going to take your paper, you're going to split it up into a couple columns, right? Now, what you're going to start with is actually the B column. So A is going to stay A. That's the antecedent. We'll talk about that in a minute. B is behavior. So what is happening? Okay. Like, what is the actual behavior? So we can use like anxiety as an example. Okay. I make a mistake say you made a mistake at something, or you ever say something and then you replay the conversation over and over and over again, right? So like, oh, I accidentally told somebody's secret. Like somebody told me something and I repeated it and I didn't realize it was a secret. That's the behavior, right? I said it. I want you to then go to the A, which is the antecedent. That's just the trigger. What happened right before this thing? All right, well, this was a new group of moms that I hadn't hung out with before, and I didn't really have anything to connect with, but they were talking. Oh, let's do a gossip example, right? Because this is like super easy when you're making like superficial friends, like new friends. If you don't have anything in common, what do people often do? They talk about other people. It's like a super nasty trait, right? But we find ourselves, I know that I have certain groups of people that I know I cannot be around because I find myself getting pulled into it. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about other people. Like, I don't like that. So I don't want to hang out with those people. But it happens. Like, let's be real, right? So you can say something like, I talked crap about somebody or whatever it was. Right before that, I was trying to get into the conversation. So other people were talking badly and I just felt like I should do it, right? Like what happened before? Because what this does is it allows you to identify what a trigger to this behavior is. It allows you to pick out something that's like, throwing you off and saying, why is this happening? Well, then we move to the C. Now, C is typically consequence, but what we're going to do is break that out a little bit further, okay? What you're going to ask yourself is, what does it make me feel? All right, so I was in this group. I got caught up in gossiping with other people. I feel really guilty about it. I feel like I'm a really bad person and I feel guilty. Like the feeling is guilt, okay? Why do you think you're feeling that? That's our next column, like F, and what am I feeling? Why I think I'm feeling that? Well, because I wouldn't like it if I left a room and somebody was talking about me. Like that's not a good character trait. And I grew up like, you know, talking about people all the time and I didn't like the way the person I was and I've changed my behavior and I feel like this group of people like got me out of character. And so I think I just kind of like got really pulled into it. Okay. What are you making this mean? Well, I'm making this mean like I'm a really awful person. Like I am that terrible person people like might think I am. And I am a terrible friend and no one's gonna want to be my friend because who's gonna want to be friends with somebody who talks about other people? And if, and I really want to fit in with this group of moms, but I can't fit in with this group of moms, like really go through it. Okay. And then your final column is what is the truth? What is the truth about the situation? You know what? I got swept up in it. I don't want to talk about other people. I don't like that. That's not a character trait that's good of mine. I'm not going to do it again. And I'm going to recognize that maybe this isn't a group that I want to be a part of because I don't want to be a part of a group that just talks about other people. Go through the columns. What's the behavior? What happened right before the behavior? What are you feeling? Why do you think you're feeling that way? And then finally, what is the truth? What this type of mental health journaling will allow you to do is pause, analyze, and see patterns. I do this whenever I start to get into my anxiety spiral. I yelled at my kids, right? And I'll go through the whole process of like, and then I thought I was the worst mom ever and blah, blah, and all those things. And it allows me to journal through and think, who am I like really? What am I really feeling? And is it as bad as I thought? And again, it stops me. It lets me bring it back. Now, I want to show you a new tracker that you can use. It's a new planner we brought into the printable shop. One of the things we're doing at APDM is bringing kind of a new planner, tracker, printable bundle for super low price into the shop so that if you have a specific goal and you want help tracking it, you can use this tool. So I'm going to share my screen for on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast, don't worry about it. I'm going to walk you through it and I'm going to show you a little bit about this brand new tracker that I've made. All right, so I think you can see the tracker here if you're up here on YouTube. So this is our self-care, our mental health tracker. And really there's a bunch of different options for you. And the reason I love to make these printables, and we're going to have it linked up over in the show notes. You can also go to a purposedrivenmom.com/mental health. That's where this will be linked. One of the reasons I really like this though, is because you can choose your adventure with what you need. You can print out the papers that you need. And then that way you can kind of make your own binder and have everything written down. I like the writing, friends. I know that we want to type everything, but there's something about writing. So there's some daily self-care sections. So the whole first section of it is self-care challenges, action planners. What did you do? How did it go? Did you get any me time in? Prompts for journaling, things like that. And then there's some mental health check-ins. We've got some tips for you here. as well as habits around your mental health, which is really, really healthy for you, that you can have, and then how you're feeling. Now, inside, there's also a lot of trackers that look like the one I'm showing you. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're on the podcast, just know that these are ones that have kind of like a key to them. So you could say, like, how did this make me feel? How am I feeling? There's some journaling sections and check-ins. We've got a morning check-in, a nighttime check-in, and then we move into the gratitude list where you can print one out for each month. There's also daily gratitude journals. Again, on YouTube, you can see what these all look like. If you go to a purposedrivenmom.com/mental health, you can also see all the pictures as well. A ton of different options for gratitude, whatever you want to do. Again, choose your own adventure kind of on these for that. And then there's some really great prompts, exercises to talk about you. Like, what are your strengths? What are you good at? What are things that distract you? What are things you're getting ready to get rid of? Things like that. And then just some plain journaling pages as well with different prompts. As we scroll through, there's also, let's see, here's another emotion tracker for you. A lot of different options. So this way you can choose your own adventure on how you're feeling. But again, you're going to want to see the patterns. The patterns are what's going to tell you how things are really going versus everything's awful, everything's terrible, I don't know what to do. Okay. We've got a whole different variety of mood trackers that you can color in whatever color you're interested. This whole thing's about 75 pages. So there's tons of stuff here. There's also, this is the fun one to make. It's a monthly. So each month, no matter when you're getting this, you can pick your code at the very bottom here. You choose what color you want things to be. And every day you can color it in, and they're cute. They're themed based on, the month and things like that. So there's one of those for each of it, a variety of mood trackers, and then we kind of move into some tools. All right. So we've got some stuff on the Eisenhower matrix, how to organize some of your stress, some different exercises around gratitude, positive affirmations, and then it kind of closes with a few options for breathing to help your self-care. And so this is the newest printable pack. We've got super affordable for you. You can get it for $17. It's inside the APDM store. You can go to the links over at the show notes at a purposedrivenmom.com/podcast 399. But what I'd love for you to do today is take care of yourself. Do one thing for your self-care. Do one piece of gratitude. Stop and journal one piece so that you can connect and know that, like, all of us struggle with different varying levels of mental health issues. I highly recommend finding a therapist and a licensed professional to talk to, but just know that starting with journaling is a really great way to just identify your feelings. So when you do get to sit down and talk with someone, you can tell them, this is what I'm feeling. Here's my data, right? Like, here's how I've been. Here's where I could use some help, and go from there. Have a really great day. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope these tips helped you today, and I'll see you next week.